people have to go hungry. Don't give them welfare, let them go hungry, let them get desperate. And that's actually the best education, really.
Please join us for our next live stream, Sunday, August 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll go over current events, past guests, and of course, gold and silver news. Once again, our next live stream will be Sunday, August 15th, 9 p.m. Eastern. See you then. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira. As always, if you are new to our channel or if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe. Hit the bell to be notified on new updates and give us a thumbs up. If you like what we do, we truly do appreciate your support. Jayant Bhandari is our guest today. Jayant is a mining analyst and global investor, and Jayant also organizes Capitalism and Morality, an annual seminar held in Vancouver, Canada, that brings together the finest minds to discuss the philosophies of freedom and liberty. And we're delighted to have Jayant as a return guest on SBTV. It's time to saddle up and silver up for Jayant Bhandari. Jayant, welcome back to SBTV. How are you doing?
Very well, Patrick. Thanks for having me today.
Glad to have you back on. It's been a while, and things have definitely changed since we had you last on. Today, I'd like to talk to you about China. Now, obviously, China's rise in the last couple of decades has had a major impact on the world. Although the country is officially seen as communist, some like yourself, you've called it a sort of a capitalist, even though it operates in somewhat of a socialist market economy. How does one begin to understand China, and how does the country think?
Patrick, really, China is perhaps the most capitalist country on the planet today. You can go to a bank late in the night on Sunday. A lot of bank branches are open on Saturdays and Sundays until later in the evenings. You can pretty much get whatever you want as long as you're prepared to pay for it. You get increasingly quality service and quality stuff in China. A lot of high technology medical equipment, high technology equipment now come from China. They are as good quality equipment as you expect from Japan or Germany. So in many, many ways, China is a very open, free market, capitalistic country. Now, of course, it does not have the moral foundations that Western society used to have. But then Western society has lost those as well. So why look down at China when China is at least doing very well when it comes to the free market? The taxes are low as well in China.
Jayant, can you tell us a bit about the Chinese work ethic and how does it differ from the West?
Well, listen, Patrick, I am a big fan of the Western society, big fan of the Western civilization, but increasingly the Western society is becoming decrepit. It's becoming old. It's becoming increasingly what we now call woke. It's a increasingly woke culture dominating the Western society, particularly the US. Now, Chinese at the same time are passionate about what they want to achieve in their lives. They send their children to schools. They want to make sure their children do well. They work hard to make sure that progress in life, and they save a lot of money to make sure they have savings for their old age. Now, that's not what we usually see in the Western society increasingly, because a lot of people, particularly the underclass, or I would say 60-70% people, they use up every single penny of cash that they ever earn. They use it up and then they live on their credit cards because they are reasonably sure about social welfare and free healthcare. And the end result is that they don't really have the passion to think about the future increasingly. Also, single motherhood, it's looked down upon in East Asia, everywhere in East Asia, whereas in the Western society, they are almost celebrated. Now, I have nothing much against single motherhood, but you have to accept that there are problems related with bringing up a child in a single parent family, and you don't really want to encourage it because family is the building block of a society, and families are seen as a very important part of East Asia. whereas families in the Western society are increasingly getting disintegrated. And not because that's what Western civilization philosophically requires these people to do, but that's happening because since 1960 or whatever the year was, when hippie revolution happened, or whenever people gave up on Christianity, and when people took to depravities as a morally acceptable way of life. And the end result is that over the last 40 to 60 years, Western society has increasingly fallen apart.
You mentioned how in the West we have a lot of these social safety nets, whereas China really doesn't have any.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if you don't work and if you don't have savings, you go hungry, and won't get treated in the hospital either. Now, you might get some treatment in a government hospital, but that's pretty much the case in all of East Asia, including in China. Now, that's when people get a wrong impression when they think about China as a socialist country. It is not a socialist country. If you don't work, you don't eat. No one gives you free jobs. You have to work. You have to get your job done. Otherwise, you get fired and you have to look for your job again. So, as you expect from a socialist country where the government guarantees you a job, perhaps, that's not the case in China. So, I don't call China a socialist country.
How well do you know about how the Chinese people feel about communism, let's say? I mean, do they want it? Do they want this communism, or do they want some type of a democracy?
Well, I don't know for sure, because Chinese people don't like to talk politics. Whenever I have a lot of Chinese friends, and whenever in public area I like to talk with them about politics, they sort of avoid the topic. And even at home, they are not really so interested in politics. And maybe that's a good thing, Patrick, because they're focused about improving their lives and doing their job properly, rather than thinking about things on which they have limited influence and a very limited understanding. So a lot of Chinese, from what I have seen, is stay away from conversations on politics. But moreover, they don't really think that their life gets too affected by the government. They pay relatively low taxes, and they have a reasonably safe country. In most of China, I would feel safer than I would in, let's say, the US today. And women don't worry about getting into problems in China much, at least in big cities. So China is a very different country than a lot of people think it to be. And China is in no way a communist country, in no way a socialist country. It is as much of a free market as you can imagine. And yes, indeed, young people probably in China want to have democracy, or at least there should be a higher proportion of people who want democracy as time goes by. But the problem is, Patrick, democracy is an utter disaster. Democracy is one of the reasons why the Western countries have continued to decay. Because really, Patrick, a vast majority of population is interested in bread and circuses, and that's how they vote for politicians. And as a result, you will invariably get really decrepit, low-class, psychopathic people into politics. Now, when you have a meritocratic system as you have in China, there is much more likelihood for you to have meritocratic, smart, focused people coming into politics. And then they are accountable as well, because they don't get removed that quickly, and they have to accept responsibilities for whatever that goes wrong.
Meritocracies. Has the U.S. kind of lost this already, where what you do no longer matters as perhaps how you look, or perhaps what your preferences are? Is this one of the bigger downfalls that is taking democracy down with it?
Absolutely, Patrick. For the last few months, what I have seen is that among the venture companies that I follow for investment purposes, virtually every company is chasing people of color and women for positions of management and directorship. And you see the same thing in the city halls. You see the same thing in the government. what you see is that there's a preference given to people of color, to women. And the end result is that increasingly leadership positions are becoming degraded with less qualified people, with people who do all the virtue signaling, or people who are not really competent, but they get there because they have been promoted out of turn because of their sex, or because of their sexual orientation, or because of the color of their skin. And because they also get promoted faster in many cases, it just creates a very warped organizational structure. Your manager ends up becoming your subordinate eventually, despite that he might be more qualified than you are. And this is, what I see in the Western society today is what happened in South Africa, where meritocracy was destroyed, and where people were given out-of-turn promotions. You brought in corrupt, psychopathic people to a higher level. And that's what increasingly I see in the Western society. You can see the fact that I spend a lot of time in California, for example. You see forest fires all the time in the summertime. Or you had this electricity outages in Texas, or you had bridges collapsing in the US. And I always question, why did those things happen? Is it because they are not anymore competent to do what they do? Why did the flood happen in Germany the way it did and killed scores of people? Are those people not competent enough? Are they the people who got promoted out of turn in an anti-meritocratic fashion? These are the questions we should ask, but these are such politically incorrect questions that not many people dare ask. And the journalists don't ask those questions. We should be asking those questions.
Especially in today's cancel culture type of situation going on here. But sticking with China, China's progressing both internally and externally, especially with the Belt and Road Initiative. What's your opinion on this?
Well, I am not a big fan of Belt and Road Initiative. I'm absolutely sure China wants to help other countries develop. China wants to have the market for its products, and China wants to have suppliers of natural resources for China. So China is trying to do those things, but a lot of these top-down infrastructural things, top-down macro plannings don't really work out as anticipated. As you can see, China ended up in a lot of problems in Africa. They thought they could go to Africa, bribe people around, get things done. That's not how Africa works. They set up train systems in many countries, and they were never able to get decent returns or even the return of capital from those investments. They got into trouble in Sri Lanka. They have problems in Pakistan. Now they are suddenly realizing that terrorists are blowing up Chinese as well in Pakistan. So, sometimes with these top-down way of working, things go wrong. But again, Patrick, I am a big fan of what China has achieved, what their leadership has done. But as far as the Belt and Road Initiative is concerned, I'm not really necessarily a big fan.
And by now, made in China it's not new to anyone anywhere in the world. China is the manufacturing powerhouse today, and in fact, a lot of people call it the factory of the world. And many Western companies have even set up shop in China looking to get a lower cost of production. Jayant, what do you say to people in other countries that look to blame China for stealing their jobs?
Listen, I think Western countries should have avoided throwing out manufacturing from their countries. They started over-regulating their economies. They started giving too much welfare to their own people. So while their own people were becoming unemployed, they were sending jobs to China, which was truly a stupid thing to do. But the fact is that Chinese are prepared to work hard. They are prepared to organize themselves into generating productivity. Why should you blame them for your problems? Why should we be envious about what China has achieved? We should actually celebrate it, Patrick. In fact, just about everything that we see on each other's screen has been made in China. The computers, the microphones, the speakers, they're all made in China. So we are beneficiary of the progress in China, and I feel very pleased and proud that China is doing so well. I go to China quite a bit, although of course I haven't been there for the last 1.5 years. But it's a fabulous country, and everyone who holds a negative view of China is very, very likely to have never been to China. They are more likely to understand China from the mainstream media, and that's where a lot of problems come from.
That's a great point there. Let's say if the U.S. were to retool and fire up the factories and mills again, could the U.S. compete, or how can the U.S. compete with China on the manufacturing side, but let's say outside of tariffs and sanctions?
That's not happening anymore, Patrick. Over the last 1 year, you have seen the woke culture ratcheting up in the US. The whole leftist movement is ratcheting up in the US and in the rest of the Western countries. And the problem is that a lot of people call this woke culture leftism. It is not leftism. Woke culture is actually similar to third world culture. Remember when China and Russia were communist countries, they were still third world countries in Africa and in Indian subcontinent. And they were much more poor than the communist countries were. Communist countries were Russia probably had 5 or 10 times more GDP per capita, even when it was communist. The woke culture of the third world is completely irrational. It is completely amoral. There's no organizational skills among these people, and it's all a culture of expediency and entitlement. And that's what we have got in the US today. These are losers who want free money, free alcohol. They don't want any responsibilities. They don't want to have families. It's a strange kind of low-class culture that is emergent in the Western society. And as a result, you can't really change their mindsets, at least in a couple of generations. And America will face problems much before that. So I don't think manufacturing is moving back to the US. You know, a bit of it would have moved under Trump. Trump was given the circumstances, a good president to have. But now we don't even have Trump. Now we have Biden and Kamala Harris. Sorry, it isn't going to improve anymore.
I think with what you're saying with the woke culture, when it comes to the economy, trying to bring back these the manufacturing base, it's not even an economic. It almost has nothing to do with the economy anymore. It really has more to do with the mindset of the people.
Patrick, people have to go hungry. Don't give them welfare, let them go hungry, let them get desperate. And that's actually the best education, really. It makes you proud, it makes you honorable, and it makes you self-responsible. But the welfare system destroys that capability. I have spent a lot of time in Mexico over the last 1 year. And a lot of Mexican airports have been quite busy with people. And the reason is that these people have been getting free checks from the government. And what they decided to do was to get the passport for the first time and go to Mexico to party. So these free checks, these debt that the government has been creating is not resulting into a good society. It's resulting into an immoral society, a decadent, hedonistic society.
And another thing that we often hear with China is they are a currency manipulator. In your opinion, is that true?
I don't think so at all, Patrick. I think China gets blamed for it sometimes, and Chinese currency, they have maintained a sort of peg with the American dollar. And Chinese currency has actually improved in value quite often. I haven't followed it very closely over the last few months, but I don't think they necessarily control their currency. But of course, it's a new emerging economy. Don't try to put a value on China by comparing it with a Western country. China was a pathetic third world country 30 years back. It's a second world country today, and it's an emerging economy still. So don't try, when people try to measure China using the yardstick of America, it actually should tell you how good China has become. Now, China could be manipulating their currency. They have to manage their currency. They have to manage a lot of things. I mean, it's a country which has continued to grow for 30 years. they can easily have overheating in the economy and they can easily have social instability. And they have done very well in managing those things. So, yes, they might be managing some of these things, but they have done a good job.
And their currency, the yuan, let's use, is not a fully internationalized currency like the dollar or other major traded currencies. In your opinion, what do you think China's strategy is regarding its currency, and why has it been slow thus far to push for broader adoption?
Well, they have now you actually have offshore yuan. You can actually buy yuan offshore. So they are increasingly allowing trading of their own currency. But again, it's still a new country and they probably don't want to suffer a consequence of speculative trading in their currency if they make it fully floatable currency. So I can see that there might be a transition from where they are to where they want to get to. Also, they want to make sure that capital does not leave in a corrupt way from China. There are a lot of corrupt people in China. There's a lot of bad money in China, and they probably want to make sure that those people don't run away. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily all good, but as long as a country continues to improve what it does, I'm reasonably happy with what they are doing. And look at Macau. Macau was a big gambling center. It still is probably. But they suffered a lot because China actually did control corruption in China, did stop people from playing with corrupt money in Macau, which meant that my investments in casinos in Macau suffered quite a bit. But that also tells me that China is actually trying to rein in on corruption.
As mentioned, you do go back and forth to China quite a bit. You understand the people quite a bit, the government quite a bit. In your opinion, though, what is China's strategy when it comes to the U.S.?
I don't, this is very hard for me to say because I don't mingle necessarily with politicians in China. The fact is that China has never has always been an inward-looking country. They have almost never tried to attack other countries. Now, people give China a lot of bad name for what it did in Hong Kong or what it does a bit in Taiwan or Tibet. But those are very minor issues, and Hong Kong and Taiwan are basically Chinese people. So China gets a lot of bad name for being expansionary or trying to influence the world. I don't think Chinese mind works that way. China wants to do materially well, and they just want to improve their society and progress. I don't think they play the game of dominating other countries. Their interest, whenever I see them operating elsewhere, is to make sure that their own interests are protected. They are not there to show off their strength or necessarily to dominate other people.
How about the people on the ground, just the regular people that you meet? What's their opinion of the U.S. or let's say even the West?
Well, clearly, Chinese like Americans. A lot of hundreds of thousands of Chinese students go to America. They love it. America is a much better place than China is. The only problem is China is improving and America is getting worse by the day. So the future is not necessarily great for America. But America is a great place, and a lot of Chinese that I meet want to live in the US. I have a lot of Chinese friends who have become citizens of America because they like America. They like the freedoms that they get in America, which they don't necessarily get in China. So at least among the people I have met, they have a positive opinion about America.
Okay, and for China, as mentioned, it is a nation on the rise, and it is a nation that is going to be number one in just about everything in every phase. What do you think their end game is? Meaning, what is going to be the breakthrough for China to be recognized as let's say number one globally?
Well, it will still take China quite a few decades to beat America in terms of GDP per capita. America is still a far more advanced country compared to China is. China is more comparable to Mexico than to the US. But the fact remains that China is developing very rapidly. Chinese growth rate is over 8% right now. And in 2020, China was among the very rare countries that actually grew economically in 2020. So China has continued to grow, whereas Western countries are starting to stagnate or they are starting to sputter. So China will eventually take over other countries, and maybe China will have problems before it gets there because you have no country in the history of humanity that grew so much over such a long time and did not face social instability. So it's very hard to project the future. But for now, China continues to improve, and China is already, in so many ways, the top country in the world. Again, look around yourself. Most of the things you see around you are made in China, not in US or Germany. So China, for you and me, is already the most important country.
That's a good point there. And I think, Jayant, if everybody's going to be honest here, I think we are seeing where the things that made the U.S. what it is, the freedoms, the liberties, and things like that, we are seeing them starting to diminish somewhat. But yet, when you look at East Asia, freedoms there, they are there, where a lot of us in the West, we may not recognize it.
Well, absolutely, Patrick. I actually increasingly think that maybe East Asia is now more free than the Western society is. Let's say for a white male in the US, life is a complete disaster if he says something that is seen as politically incorrect. Your job gets destroyed, you lose your friends and family, and you become a complete outcast right away. Even me, who's a person of color, people who don't like me want to blame me for being homophobic or a misogynist because that's the kind of cancel culture that has taken hold of in the Western society. Now, these are a minority of people, I have to say. I love the Western society. A lot of Western people are great people. But when you look at the institutions and the people who run the government, they are like those. They are woke people who are politically incorrect. They have tyrannical, psychopathic views, and they are destroying the moral fabric of the Western society. Again, Western society provided the concept of morality, provided the concept of civilization, but democracy and this new woke culture that has emerged has got completely infused in the institutions which have the guns and the power. So they are going to influence eventually everything in the West.
Okay, and speaking of influence, naturally China's influence is growing globally. And a lot of people do think, there may be some type of war, some type of invasion, and we kind of touched on this. But from what your experiences in China and its people, would something like war or invasions be on their mind as their dominance grows?
I don't see China as an expansionary power. Now, I know Richard Gere made China look very bad when it came to Tibet. And America wants to make China look bad for quite the right reasons, I think, when it comes to Hong Kong and Taiwan. But China isn't necessarily a country that wants to necessarily expand its border or occupy other countries. I don't see why they would want to waste their resources on fighting a war. Listen, America destroyed $2,000 billion on Afghanistan when the GDP of Afghanistan per year is only $20 billion. So they destroyed 100 times the GDP of Afghanistan on just a military misadventure in Afghanistan. When you have smart people in leadership, which is what I think Chinese have today, they would do a cost-benefit analysis. It makes no sense to invest 100 times the GDP on a country to keep that country under control. It's just mind-bogglingly stupid, that the US did. I don't think China is into that. China will likely not be a moral force in Afghanistan. It will probably operate with Taliban. It will probably do what gets China the most benefit. It's not going to try to change the society in Afghanistan. And probably that's the right thing to do anyway, Patrick. You can't change other people. We have been trying that for so many years. Let's stop it.
Okay. So, again, let's say China's on the rise. It does rise. It has its time, its decades in the sun. We're seeing how the U.S. is falling. Let's say China is up there. How do you see China, or what might the things be that would then cause China to fall?
Well, I mean, a lot can go wrong in China because it's a massive country. It has grown so much from 400 $600 per capita GDP to over 10,000 $12,000 per capita GDP. So I mean, China has grown enormously. People have become mobile. People are learning from the Western society. Chinese government really can't control what people think and learn these days because of internet. So, I don't know. A lot of things can go wrong in China, and Chinese government is certainly concerned about it. The reason why they have been trying to rein in on the banking sector and the information technology sector in China and the property sector as well in China. So, yes, a lot of things can go wrong, and I hope they don't because I love that country. And but again, life is unpredictable. So much can happen. So much can go wrong. And I might add that I see less risk in China today than I see in the Western society because they have the culture of working. They don't have the work culture. A few days back, I asked a group of Chinese and Koreans about if they knew the concept of wokeness, and they were laughing at it. No one knew about it. Those people who explained it made other people laugh at that concept. So East Asia has protected itself from this emerging woke culture. This whole cisgender intersectionality stupidities, which are now becoming a given in the Western society, does not happen in East Asia. You don't waste your time on silly pronouns and who needs to be called by what pronoun and trying to destroy the language in the process. So again, that's where I think China has done quite a good job.
Yeah, I'd have to confirm that and agree with you there. I mean, you just don't see these things on the evening news or the 24-hour news where, you have all of these social issues coming up. So I'd have to agree with you there. But for the U.S., what does it need to do to sort of put on the brakes and stop the fall and maybe possibly try and turn things around?
Well, I would certainly get rid of democracy or reduce the voting rights of people very substantially. When Scotland had democracy, only about 6% people were allowed to vote. And when America became independent, it was very similar. Only 5 or 6% people were allowed to vote. I think we really have to become meritocratic, which means that people who decide on who runs the society must be people who are elite by themselves. And that is the only way you can infuse meritocracy into the institutions. Democracy must go. Of course, it's not going away because not only these days citizens get to vote. Now, increasingly, there's a call for the immigrants and non-citizens to be allowed to vote in politics. So things are going in a completely wrong direction in the Western society today. But I think democracy should go, the welfare system should be cut down very, very, very significantly. I think it's maybe fair to give people food to eat and a corner to sleep in, which is what religious organizations used to do anyway. Government probably doesn't even need to be involved there. And it's best to let some people go hungry once in a while so that they inculcate within themselves the concept of honor and integrity and self-responsibility. But these are the things, and basically I would say Western society should go back to Christianity. Christianity was a cornerstone of the Western society. Now, I am not a Christian, I'm an atheist, but I think if I had to pick a religion, that's what it should be, because that's what made Western civilization. It was a very integral part of the Western civilization, and we threw it away without recognizing the value of Christianity. More and more people are non-believers now, and as a result, they are hedonistic. They don't have any passion or focus in their lives anymore. They live for pleasure, and life of pleasure is not a joyful life, unfortunately.
Strong words, great words. Appreciate your candor there. Jayant Bhandari, can you let our viewers know before we wrap up how they can find you, how they can find your tweets and more of your work?
Everything I do is on my website, which is jayantbhandari.com, and my Twitter account is jayantbhandari5.
Jayant, let's not wait this long to have another interview. I appreciate the time and your truthfulness. Appreciate that a lot, and hope we can do it again soon.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Patrick.
That was Jayant Bhandari, mining analyst and global investor, sharing with us his views about China. To find out more about Jayant's work, please visit his website, jayantbhandari.com. If you like this video, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the SBTV channel to be updated on new content. And you can also find the SBTV podcast on iTunes and Spotify.